guys, this is Heat King here, bringing you another video on Resident Evil 7 Retrospect. So again, yeah, it's late. If you've noticed, I've probably been filming all of these videos on the same day, so I'm just trying to get different topics out, as you will, and I'm trying to be very quiet as it is because I got people sleeping, so... But yeah, today's topic will be on the discussion of concept art and using concepts from previous games that weren't used for future games, etc, etc. I don't know how I'm going to work this, but yeah. For example, anyone who's played Resident Evil 5, you'll know that, at least from early on when it started production, you know that a lot of things ended up being very different to what we had, to what we ended up getting now. Anyone who's bought the art book for the game knows that there's a lot of stuff in the art book that ended up not being in the final version. And if you noticed from the stuff that you read in the Resident Evil 5 art book and concept, you'll see that a lot of those concepts were later reused for the following things: so Resident Evil Revelations 1, Resident Evil Damnation, and especially Resident Evil 6, where a lot of the concepts were used for Resident Evil 6. Regarding Resident Evil Revelations 1, one of the chapters in Resident Evil 5, I believe the tanker chapter, had you going onto the tanker, but it would have been a fully explorable environment, and at a certain point the tanker would have been damaged and it would have started sinking, and there would have been a timer, and you would have to have gotten to the end goal before the ship fully sunk. But this was a concept that was too difficult to do in that game, so they decided to take that and make that into a whole new game by itself, because from the very beginning, very early on, since the very beginning of Resident Evil, in fact, with the first game, Capcom have always tried to make a Resident Evil game based on a cruise ship, and they failed with that concept a few times, especially regarding games like Resident Evil Gaiden and Resident Evil Dead Aim. And Revelations 1 was sort of their way of getting that right and making the Resident Evil game that they wanted at the time with that concept. Resident Evil Damnation relates more to the unused concepts of the Lickers and the rebellion, the sort of rebellion that was going on in the original concepts for Resident Evil 5. You know, Chris would arrive in Africa and he would meet Sheva, who was this sort of rebel leader leading a faction against another faction in the Kukujuju area. And at one point in the game, you know, and had they designed it, there would have been an event where the BSA are, along with the rebels that Sheva leads, I believe, are under attack by a horde of Lickers, and you had to hold out for rescue to come in. So we kind of see that sort of rebellion battle and damnation with the plot, you know, being focused on these rebels trying to take on the government, and the Lickers being this very big focus on the game. And there was also the whole concept of the Plagas being used to control the various monsters in the game, with Wesker having lost his eye during the mansion incident and having a Master Last Plagas inserted in a glass ball and into his head, and he would use that to control them, to have power over them, and eventually that would have been his weak point as well during the end game, where you'd had to shoot out his eye. But those concepts were not used, obviously. Maybe an element of it was used where he keeps getting injected, and we do see something in those fluids that he has. Obviously the serum was meant to keep him stable, but I also feel like maybe the control Plagas were in those as well. Again, no big 100% confirmation there, but it could have been a very visual thing they were trying to go for instead of telling us outright. But as you all know, in the movie, one of the characters, I believe, what was his character's name? He ended up having a control Plagas injected into him where he could control the Lickers, so it's kind of similar to at least the concepts anyway, but the ideas and the whole stories were very different. With Resident Evil 6, you had a ton of unused ideas from Resident Evil 5 making it into the game. These include, for example, the battle with the BSA against a horde of El Giganto in a certain area, and you need to go from point to point trying to destroy them and kill them. We do get that in Resident Evil 6 with the campaign with Chris's campaign and Jake's campaign, when you're taking on the multiple giant BOWs and you have to navigate, and the BSA are fighting them at the same time. So that is obviously a concept taken from that was used here. And then of course there was a concept in the original Resident Evil 5 where you as Chris would be in the desert, you know, you're trying to find the location of the hidden base, and you would end up falling down into these ruins, and you would have to swim underground through these underground ruins, and eventually you'd make it to a point where you have to fight the spider-like guardian in the garden of the flowers. But this concept was obviously changed around, where the swim mechanics were taken out. You didn't fall into this underground ruin. You didn't fight a giant spider monster in a garden. Instead, you fought the giant crab BOW after you've passed the garden area and the liquor area and the hold and that. In Resident Evil 6, you kind of get that with Leon's Chapter 2 campaign. You do end up falling into this garden-like area, and it's pretty much very similar to the progenital garden in Resident Evil 5. The only difference being that now you've got Helena's sister, Diane, I believe, that's there, and she ends up mutating into a spider-like creature that starts chasing you around. So it's kind of very, at least sort of similar to the concept there. And if you remember in Chapter 3, you do end up falling into these underground ruins where you have to swim out eventually. So again, very similar to that. Another unused concept idea was the fact that Tricell's hidden base was meant to be located in a volcano. Now, if you'll remember, Neo Umbrella's secret base was located underwater in the crevice of a volcano. So again, ideas sort of coming in here, fruition if you will. And the final boss fight with Wesker was meant to be on top of the jet of the Fallen Plane, which is surrounded completely by lava, and you were meant to have a fist fight with him. Now this is obviously similar to the final boss fight you have as Jake against Ustanag in the Neo Umbrella volcanic underwater base, where you're in this certain section where there's completely lava flowing in and you're fighting Ustanag hand to hand. So again, unused ideas from 5 making it in here in a way. And yeah, I believe those were potentially the general ideas. The explorable ships sort of came back again in Chris's and Ada's campaign, but not too much. And again, there was meant to be one of the other final parts of Resident Evil 5 was you meant to be controlling a jet and killing Wesker with that. And in Resident Evil 6 you did end up flying a jet eventually. So yeah, again, ideas coming back and forming again, etc, as you will. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for there was probably more. The Ustanag already is an example of an unused tyrant concept. Now I don't remember if this was Resident Evil 5 or one of the earlier games, but at one point you were meant to fight a tyrant that was meant to be very robotic or cybernetic in nature. So the Ustanag comes the closest to that concept, if you will, not a nemesis. A nemesis was a tentacle sort of parasitic infected creature. Ustanag was pretty much sort of robotic, but with the changing of the hands and arms and that, so that comes close to that concept idea, if you will. And yeah, anything else? I guess the original version for Revelations 1 with the clone aspect of the Chris clone, and that was obviously sort of replaced, I guess, with, again, if you will, with the Ada clone for 6. So obviously there were sort of changes there. And if you guys know, and if you remember, the original concept for Resident Evil 3, before it was a game about escaping Raccoon City, was meant to have you playing as Agent Hank on a cruise ship trying to steal or get the virus to Umbrella. And if you remember the original trailer from Revelations 1, you do see what appears to be Hank in there. So obviously again, Capcom and its team, depending on the team, always trying to go back to the original concepts and never really getting it right. I mean, Resident Evil 7, for example, the whole concept of hallucinations, I guess, and supernatural elements is sort of a callback basically to what was the original version of Resident Evil 4 or Resident Evil 3.5 beta version, the Hookman or 4th version, I believe, where Leon would get infected, he would hallucinate. So this is obviously a callback to that. And at one point, Leon's arm would get infected and something would happen and he would die at the end. With Resident Evil 7, we do know that your character does end up having his arm injured, cut off, I don't know, sewn back on, I'm not too sure, but again, the whole sort of hallucination ideas and the concepts are sort of very, very sort of similar, if you will. Anything else? One of the original concepts for Resident Evil 5 had you fighting the Ouroboros on a moving train, and the Ouroboros would swallow and destroy this train trying to get to you. This was a concept that was cut in Resident Evil 5. I guess it was sort of changed around for the train battle with Simmons instead. But yeah, again, just trying to make notes here. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to point out the fact of whether or not maybe RE7 was meant to be Vendetta before it was changed around, but I'm also bringing up the fact of what possible ideas they could have scrapped from the Resident Evil 7 that we were meant to get that we didn't, or whether or not Resident Evil 7 is going to have concepts not used in Resident Evil 5 or even 6, if there were any that were meant to be used along with maybe Resident Evil 4, because there were things in Resident Evil 4 that did end up coming back in 5, especially with the Spencer estate, which was meant to be in Resident Evil 4 in the original Hookman 4 version before it was cancelled. But again, it's just stuff. I'm here to bring you some new stuff for you guys to think about and to just be curious and learn about. That's what I'm doing here. But yeah, I hope you guys like this video, and I hope you guys like what I've told you about, and I'm curious what you think on what you think might be used or not. Yeah, I'm curious to see how this overall game is going to turn out, because I'm getting very excited. We only have a few more weeks left, so you know, just have to be patient now, I guess. As always guys, like and subscribe, whatever, and I shall see you when I shall see you. Take care and bye.